When I saw the house for the first time, I felt my life was over. It was a very big house. It was made of glass and stone. It had 3 floors. It was not a home. It was a cage. My parents told me about Daniel. They said, he is a good man. But they did not tell me everything. They did not tell me that a good man can still be a man who locks you in. They did not tell me that his house would feel like a prison. He locked the doors after I came in, and I knew my old life was gone forever. My old life was in a very small village. It was so small you could not find it on most maps. It was just a tiny dot. My life there was simple and happy. I remember the sound of the wind in the fields of corn. I remember the smell of my mother's bean soup. She cooked it on an open fire. It was the best smell in the world. I remember a boy named Juma. His father was the baker. Juma said he wanted to marry me. He made a promise. He said he would give my family 2 goats and a sewing machine for me. That was my future. It was a small future, but it was mine. I understood it. I was happy with it. But then, things changed. There was no rain for a long, long time. The sun was hot, and the ground became hard and cracked. Our plants died. We had no food from our harvest. We had no money. People my father owed money to came to our house. They were big men with angry faces. They hit our door. It was a thin door made of tin. The sound was very loud and scary. We had nothing to give them. Soon after, a woman came to our village. She was a matchmaker. She found husbands for girls. She carried a red folder. Inside that red folder was a picture of a man. The man was Daniel. My mother said his name very quietly. She said it like it was a special secret prayer. She said, "He is a rich man. He will take care of all of us." I looked at my mother and my father. They looked tired and sad. I knew they were doing this for our family, but when my mother said all of us, I felt like she did not mean me. She meant she and my father and my sister would be safe, but I would be the price they paid. I would be sent away. My life was not my own anymore. Section 1. The contract I never signed. The day of the wedding was not a happy day. I did not wear a pretty white dress. There were no beautiful flowers. There was no music or dancing. There was only a piece of paper on a wooden table. It was a contract, a marriage contract. I had to sign my name on it. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking. The black ink from the pen looked like blood on the white paper. After I signed it, Daniel put a ring on my finger. It was a gold ring. It was heavy and tight. It felt like it was biting my skin. It did not feel like a symbol of love. It felt like a chain. During all of this, my father did not look at me. He looked at the floor. He looked at the walls. He looked everywhere but at my face. I think he was ashamed. I think he was sad. I wanted him to look at me. I wanted him to say, "This is wrong. We cannot do this. Let's go home." I kept waiting for someone to stop it all. I hoped it was a bad joke. I hoped they would shout, "We were just kidding." And then we would all get in the old truck and drive back to our village. But no one did. The joke was real. The joke was my life now. Instead, a big expensive car was waiting. Daniel opened the door for me. I got in. He got in the driver's seat. He started the car and we drove away. I looked out the back window. I saw my village getting smaller and smaller. Then it was just dust. Then it was gone. The road was long. It was like a long ribbon of gray tape that took me further and further from everything I knew. We were in the car for 2 hours. For all that time, Daniel did not say one word to me. The silence was heavy. It filled the car. I was too scared to speak. So I counted things. I counted the trees we passed. I counted my own breaths, in and out, in and out. I tried to think of ways to escape. Could I open the door and run? Where would I go? I had no money. I had no one. My heart was beating so fast, it felt like a drum. It felt like it was hitting the glass of the windshield trying to break out. When the car finally stopped, the silence was even louder. The engine was off. All I could hear was the sound of my own scared heart. In front of us was the house. His house. It was huge. It rose up like a mountain made of stone and glass. It did not look friendly. It looked cold and empty. Daniel got out of the car. He did not help me. He just walked to the front door and unlocked it. I took a deep breath and got out of the car. I followed him inside. The inside of the house was even bigger than the outside. My footsteps made loud sounds that bounced off the high ceilings and empty walls. Every sound I made was an echo. A woman came to meet us. She was a maid. She wore a clean, dark dress. She looked at my small bag. It was an old duffel bag with all my clothes inside. The way she looked at me was with pity. It was the same look you give to a small, lost animal, like a wet puppy found in the rain. She took my bag from my hand. Her hands were soft. My hands were rough from working in the fields. Daniel was gone. He had just disappeared into one of the many rooms. I stood alone in the huge entrance hall. The floor was shiny like a mirror. I was still holding my school bag. It was old and made of cloth. I held it very tight. It was the only thing I had that felt like home. It had my old books and pencils inside. It was the last piece of my old life. That night, they showed me to a room. It was called a guest room, but it was bigger than my entire house back in the village. There was a huge bed in the middle of it. The bed had soft white sheets. It looked like a cloud. I sat on the edge of it. It was so soft, but I did not feel comfortable. I could not relax. I felt like a stranger. I felt like a prisoner. Later that night, I tried to sleep. I closed my eyes, but sleep did not come. All I could see in my mind was the small lamp we had at home. It used my mother's kerosene oil. It made a small, flickering light, and I could hear my mother's voice in my head. She was whispering to me the way she did the night before I left. "Be brave, Bella," she said. "Be brave." I lay in the big, soft bed in the dark, silent house, and I cried. I did not feel brave at all. Section 2. The Silence That Talked. The days started to turn into weeks. Life in the big house was always the same. It was quiet and lonely. Daniel was a man of routine and silence. He left the house very early in the morning before the sun came up. I would hear his car drive away. He came back late at night, long after the sun went down. We lived in the same house, but we were like two ghosts. We never saw each other during the day. We ate our dinner together, but we were not together. We sat at a very, very long wooden table. It was so long, you could play a game of soccer on it. He sat at one end. I sat at the other end. The space between us felt huge, like a big, empty field. The only sound was the sound of our forks and knives on the plates. The silence was louder than any noise. In the first week, I tried to talk to him. I tried to fill the empty space with words. I would ask him simple questions. I would talk about small things. I talked about a book I was reading. I talked about the sound of rain on a tin roof, a sound I loved from my village. I told him about the big mango tree in the center of our village, where the children played. I just wanted to hear his voice. I just wanted him to look at me, to see me. But he would only nod. He would nod his head 2 times. A small nod, then another small nod. That was his answer for everything. And then the silence would come back, even heavier than before. It felt like the air in the room was getting tight, like a hand closing into a fist. After a while, I stopped trying. It was too hard. It hurt too much to talk to a wall. So I started to find other ways to mark the time. I could not tell the days by talking or sharing things. So I watched the garden outside my window. There were many rose bushes. I started to keep time by watching the roses. I would see a new rose open. Then I would watch it for days until its petals turned brown and fell off. A new rose. A dying rose. That was how my days passed. Each dead rose was another day of my life gone. Then one day, something different happened. It was the 12th day I was in that house. I remember because I was counting. I was walking down the long, empty hall. On a small table near the stairs, there was a book. It was not there before. I walked closer to look at it. The book was called The Secret Garden. On the front cover, there was a small yellow sticky note. I picked up the book. My hands were shaking a little. I read the words on the note. The handwriting was neat and clear. It said, "Thought you might like this. D. D." It was from Daniel. It was the first time he had communicated with me in any real way. It was not a nod. It was a sentence. It was a whole thought. I held the book to my chest. It felt like a small key. It was the first small crack in the wall of silence he had built around himself, around us. That one small sentence felt like a shout in the quiet house. That night, I did not feel so lonely. I sat up in my bed and I read the book. I could not put it down. I read and read and read. The story was about a girl named Mary Lennox. She was a lonely girl who was sent to live in a big, strange house that she never asked for. She felt lost and angry. Her story felt like my story. I read the whole book in one night. I finished it at 3 a.m. The sun was not up yet. Tears were running down my face. I was crying for Mary in the book, but I was also crying for myself. I was crying because I understood that I was not the only girl in the world who had woken up in a life that was not hers. And maybe, just maybe, like the girl in the book, I could find my own secret garden. The book gave me a small piece of hope. It was the first light I had seen in a long time. Section 3. The Secrets in the Garden. My hands were always shaking a little. It was from fear. It was from loneliness. I needed something to do with my hands. I needed something to make them steady. Reading the book about the secret garden gave me an idea. The house had a big garden, but it was mostly just grass and roses that someone else took care of. There was an empty patch of earth at the back of the property. It was forgotten and full of weeds. I decided I would make my own garden there. I needed to feel the dirt in my hands. I needed to create something. I needed to plant something that felt real. The first day, I went out with just my hands. I pulled at the weeds. The work was hard, my back hurt, but it felt good. It felt good to be tired from work, not from sadness. The next day, I found an old spade in a shed. I started to dig. I turned over the soil, preparing it for seeds. I decided to plant things I knew from home. I would plant tomatoes and beans and bright yellow sunflowers. I wanted to plant things that were useful and beautiful, anything that felt like life. On that first day of digging, I saw him. Daniel was standing at the kitchen window. He was watching me. He did not wave. He did not smile. He just watched. I felt nervous. I thought maybe he would be angry that I was digging up his yard, but he just stood there for a long time. And then he was gone. I kept working. I did not know what he was thinking. The next morning, I went out to my small patch of earth. Something was different. Next to my spade, there was a pair of gardening gloves. They were not new. They were made of soft, worn leather. They looked like they had been used for many years. There was no note this time. There were no words, just the gloves. But I knew they were from him. My heart did something strange. It felt like it tripped inside my chest. It was another small gift, another quiet message. I put the gloves on. They were a little too big for my hands, but they were warm. They felt like he was telling me, "It's okay. Keep going." After the gloves, other little gifts started to appear. They were always quiet. They were always a surprise. One day, I found a beautiful bookmark tucked inside the pages of my book. It was a dark violet color, my favorite color. How did he know that was my favorite color? Another morning, I found small paper packets next to my garden tools. On the packets, he had written the names of seeds. "Forget-me-nots," one said. I smiled when I read that. It felt like he was speaking to me through the names of flowers. On very hot afternoons, when the sun was strong and I was sweating from my work, I would find a thermos waiting for me on a nearby bench. Inside was sweet iced tea. Each one of these small things was like a quiet sentence. He was talking to me, but without using his voice, and I was starting to understand his language. One evening, everything changed. I was in my garden looking at my new small plants. They were just tiny green seedlings pushing out of the earth. I was so proud of them. Suddenly, the sky turned dark gray. A big storm was coming. The wind started to blow hard. Then, the rain began to fall. It was not a gentle rain. It was a heavy, violent rain. The sky cracked open with thunder and lightning. My first thought was for my plants, my seedlings. They were so small and weak. The heavy rain would destroy them. I did not even think. I just ran outside. I had to cover them. I was getting completely wet in just a few seconds. My hair was stuck to my face. My clothes were heavy with water. I was trying to use my hands and my body to shield the little plants from the powerful rain. Then someone was next to me. It was Daniel. He had his coat over his head to block some of the rain. He did not say anything. He just knelt down in the mud next to me. We worked together. We found some old buckets and pieces of wood, and we gently covered all the seedlings. We were both kneeling in the wet, brown mud. The rain was pouring down on us. Thunder was booming all around us. When the last tiny plant was safe under a cover, we stopped. We looked at each other. He looked at me directly in the eye. It was the first time he had ever really looked at me. His face was wet from the rain. His hair was a mess. He looked at me for a long time. Then he spoke. His voice was rough, like he had not used it in a long time. "Thank you," he said. That was all he said, but it was enough. We went inside, dripping water all over the shiny floor. That night, for the first time, he did not go to his room, and I did not go to mine. We sat at the long table, but this time, we sat closer. There was a candle on the table because the storm had made the power go out. In the soft, flickering light of the candle, he started to talk, and I listened. He told me about his mother. He told me how she loved to garden. He said she was the one who taught him everything about plants and flowers. He told me that she died. He said he built this big, empty house because he was trying to keep her memory alive. He thought if he built a beautiful place, it would make the sadness go away, but it did not. It only made him feel more alone. Then I told him about my life. I told him about my small school in the village. I told him about the wooden desk where I had carved my name on the bottom. I told him about the nights in my village when the sky was so clear and full of stars. It looked like a big, dark quilt with bright, burning holes in it. We talked for hours. We talked while the thunder rumbled outside. We talked in the light of one small candle. And as we talked, the long, empty table between us seemed to get smaller and smaller until it was not there at all. For the first time, we were not two strangers. We were just two people, sitting in the dark, telling our stories. Section 4. The Letter That Broke Me. Just as things were starting to feel different, a letter came. The envelope was thin and worn. It came from my village. I knew the handwriting immediately. It was my younger sister's handwriting. But it looked shaky and messy, not like her usual neat writing. I could see dark spots on the paper where tears had fallen and made the ink run. My heart started to beat fast with worry. I opened it carefully. I read the words. My sister wrote that our father was very sick. His illness was getting worse. The men we owed money to had come back. They were threatening to take our small house. At the end of the letter, my sister wrote, "Mama begs you. She begs you to ask Daniel for money." I read the letter again and again. I sat in my room holding the piece of paper until the words were just a blur. Ask him for money. My mother wanted me to ask this man for money, the man I was just starting to know, the man I was just starting not to be afraid of. How could I ask him for this? It felt wrong. It felt like I was proving that our marriage was just a business deal. It felt like I was a thing that was bought, and now my family wanted more money. The thought made me feel sick and ashamed. I waited all day, the letter folded in my pocket. It felt like a heavy stone. I did not know what to do. If I asked, it might ruin the small, new connection we were building. If I did not ask, my family could lose everything. My father could get even sicker without money for a doctor. That night, when Daniel came home, I could not eat. I could not speak. The old silence came back, but this time it was filled with my fear. After our quiet dinner, he went to his study. I knew this was my only chance. I walked to the door of his study. I was so scared. I stood outside the door for a long time. Finally, I took a deep breath and knocked. He said to come in. He was sitting at his big desk. There was a single lamp on, making a pool of light on his papers. He looked up at me. He looked worried. He could see that something was wrong. I could not say the words. I could not ask. So I just walked to his desk. I took the tear-stained letter out of my pocket. I unfolded it and placed it on the desk in front of him. Then I stepped back and waited. My whole body was trembling. He picked up the letter. He read it one time, his face very serious. Then he read it a second time. His jaw was tight. I could see a muscle moving in his cheek. He looked angry or upset. I was so scared. I thought he was going to yell at me. I thought he was going to say no, but he did not. He put the letter down carefully. He looked at me. His eyes were soft. He reached his hand across the desk. He reached for my hand. His fingers were warm. He held my hand gently. Then he said 2 words, "Let's go." We did not wait. We got in the car right then, in the middle of the night. We drove through the dark. The bright lights of the city slowly disappeared. Soon there were only stars in the sky above us. We drove for hours. As we got closer to my home, I could see the first light of the morning. The sky turned from black to pink over the hills I knew so well. When we arrived, my parents were waiting at the small wooden gate in front of our house. Their eyes were wide. They were looking at the expensive car. They were looking at Daniel. They looked at the dust from our village on his expensive city shoes. My father was so nervous. He bowed down to Daniel. He bowed too low. It was embarrassing. It made me sad. But Daniel did not laugh. He did not look annoyed. He treated my father with respect. He did not make a face when he saw our small house. It was just one room for our whole family. Daniel did not say much. He reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a thick envelope. He gave the envelope to my father. He did not make a big show of it. He just slipped it into my father's hand quietly. My father opened it. His eyes filled with tears. It was more money than he had ever seen. It was enough to pay all the people we owed. It was enough to buy seeds for the next planting season. It was enough to take my father to a good doctor. My mother started crying. She was thanking Daniel over and over. Then she hugged me and thanked me. Everyone was crying and happy, but I just stood there. I felt empty. I should have felt happy. I should have felt grateful. But all I could feel was a cold, sick feeling in my stomach. I looked at Daniel, this quiet man who had just saved my family, and I could only think one thing. I had just been paid for. The final payment had been made. Section 5. The Choice. I finally had. The drive back to the big house was silent, just like the first time. But this time, the silence was different. It was not empty. It was full of questions. What did he think of me now? What did he think of my family? What did this mean for us? When we got back, the quiet routine started again, but something had shifted. The air between us buzzed with all the things we were not saying. I spent most of my time in the garden. It was my safe place. It was the only place where things made sense. I planted the forget-me-not seeds he had given me. I watched my tomato plants grow strong and tall. I was building something that was mine. One night, I could not sleep. I walked through the quiet house. A light was on in the library. I had never been in the library before. The door was open a little bit. I looked inside. Daniel was there. He was sitting at a large table. The only light was from a single lamp hanging over his head. All around him, there were large sheets of paper. They were blueprints, the plans for building something. He was leaning over the papers, looking tired. He looked up when he heard me. He did not seem angry that I was there. He looked sad. "I can't get this right," he said. I walked closer. I looked at the blueprints on the table. He had been sketching a plan for a greenhouse. It was a beautiful glass building for plants. Next to it, he had drawn a bench under a big jacaranda tree that stood at the edge of the garden. He looked up at me. His eyes were full of exhaustion. "Would you help me design it?" he asked. His voice was quiet. "It's your space, too." "My space," he said, "your space." Not the guest room, not a place I was just staying in. He said it was my space, too. Those words were more important than any amount of money. Those words made me feel like I was not a charity case. He was not asking me as a favor. He was asking me like I was his partner. I walked all the way around the table until I was standing next to him. I looked at the drawing of the jacaranda tree. I picked up a pencil that was lying on the table. My hand was steady now. I leaned over the paper and I drew something. I drew a tiny swing hanging from one of the strong branches of the tree. It was a small detail, but it was my detail. It was something from my childhood, something happy. I finished drawing and looked at him. He was looking at my little drawing. Then he smiled. It was not a small nod or a tight-lipped smile. It was a real smile, a big one. It made him look younger, like a boy who had just seen a shooting star for the first time. The smile reached his eyes. That night, something changed in me. I did not go back to the big, lonely guest room. I made a choice. For the first time, I felt like I had a choice. I walked down the hall to the master bedroom. His bedroom. The door was open. He was not there yet. I walked in and I got into the bed that was supposed to be our bed. I was not a guest anymore. I was not a prisoner. I was choosing to be there. When he came in later, he saw me. He did not look surprised. He just looked at me. And this time, there was no sadness in his eyes. There was only quiet understanding. That night, I slept in his room, and for the first time, the house started to feel a little bit like a home. Section 6. The Storm That Nearly Ended Us. Months passed. The house was not so silent anymore. We started talking more. We would sit in the garden in the evenings. He would tell me about his work. I would tell him about my plants. We designed the greenhouse together. It was our project. Life was becoming calm. It was becoming happy. Then one day, I found something that brought a new storm into our lives. I was looking for an old vase in the attic. The attic was dusty and filled with old boxes and furniture covered in white sheets. In a forgotten corner, I found a small wooden box. It was not locked. I opened it. Inside were old papers and photographs, and under a pile of photos, I found a piece of newspaper. It was old and yellow. It had been folded up into a small square. I unfolded it carefully. It was a clipping from a newspaper. The headline was big and bold. It said, "Daniel Otieno cleared of mother's death." The words hit me like a punch. My mother's death. My pulse started beating like a drum in my ears. I read the short article. It was about an accident. His mother had died, and the police had thought that he was responsible. They had suspected him. I sat on the dusty attic floor, my mind spinning. Was this why he was so silent? Was this the secret he was hiding in his big, empty house? I felt a surge of anger, not at him, but at the secrets. I grabbed the newspaper clipping and marched downstairs. I needed to know the truth. I found him in his study. I walked in without knocking. I threw the yellow piece of newspaper on his desk. "What is this?" I asked. My voice was shaking, but this time with anger, not fear. He looked at the clipping. All the color drained from his face. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He looked broken. I followed him as he walked back to the attic, like he was in a trance. He started pulling down heavy boxes. They were full of legal files, court documents, and stacks of photographs. There were pictures of a much younger Daniel standing outside a courtroom. His eyes in the photos were wild with fear and pain. He finally sat down on an old trunk, and he told me everything. He told me about his mother. She had been sick for a long time. One day, There was a terrible accident at home, and she died. A business rival, a man who hated Daniel, told the police lies. He made it look like Daniel had hurt his own mother to get her money. The police investigated him. The newspapers wrote stories about him. Everyone in his life, all his friends and family, started to look at him with suspicion. They whispered about him. He told me how every word he said was twisted and used against him. He felt like he was in a trap made of words. So he just stopped talking. He built a wall of silence around himself because silence could not be twisted. Silence felt safer than words. Eventually, the rival confessed that he had lied. Daniel was cleared of all charges. His name was cleared, but the damage was done. He had lost his mother, and in a way, he had lost his voice too. He retreated into this big house to hide from a world that had judged him so unfairly. I stopped talking, he said, his voice barely a whisper because every word I said sounded like a lie, even to me. He talked for hours. The sun set and the attic grew dark, but we did not turn on a light. I just listened. I listened to all the pain and fear and loneliness he had kept locked inside him for so many years. When he was finally finished, there was a long silence. I moved closer to him. I took his hand in mine, the same way he had taken mine on that rainy night in the garden. His hand was cold. I looked at him in the dark. You are not the person they tried to make you, I said. You are not the monster from their stories, and I am not the girl my parents sold. We are not what other people say we are. He squeezed my hand. In the dusty, dark attic, surrounded by the ghosts of his past, we finally let the storm break. And when it was over, we were still holding on to each other. Section 7. The harvest we planted together. A full year passed since the day I signed the paper. 1 year since the day I thought my life was over. I stood in the garden, and it was no longer just a patch of dirt. It was a jungle of life. The bees were buzzing everywhere, happy and drunk on the nectar from the marigold flowers. My tomato plants were heavy with bright red fruit, as big as a man's fist. The greenhouse we built stood shining in the sun, and the little swing I drew on the blueprint was real now. It hung from the jacaranda branch, and on Saturdays, it was always moving, creaking softly with the weight of laughing children from the nearby village that I had started to teach. The house was different too. It was not silent anymore. It was filled with sound. It was filled with the laughter of the children. And it was filled with Daniel's laugh. His laugh was something I had never heard in the beginning. It used to be a ghost in the house. Now, it was a real, loud sound that bounced off the walls and filled every room. It was the best sound in the world. My parents came to visit sometimes. They would bring us fresh corn from their new harvest and tell us stories from the village. They were not scared of Daniel anymore. My father would talk to him about farming. My mother would show him how to cook her bean stew. One afternoon, my mother took me aside. We were standing by the rose bushes. Her eyes were bright and happy. "He's a good man, Bella," she said, touching my arm. "He is a truly good man. We chose better than we knew." I smiled at her. I did not tell her the whole story. I did not tell her that we had to choose each other. We chose each other every single day since the storm in the garden. We chose each other when we talked in the candlelight. We chose each other when we faced the ghosts in the attic. We chose each other when we decided to build a garden together. I just said, "Yes, Mama, he is." Some cages are not really cages. They just feel that way at first. Sometimes they are just empty houses waiting for someone to be brave enough to rattle the bars, to ask what secrets they are keeping out, and to let the light in. Last week, I was standing at the front gate. I saw Daniel in the garden. He was chasing the neighbor's new puppy. The little puppy was running through the flowers, and Daniel was laughing, trying to catch him. He looked so free, so happy. I thought about the girl I used to be, the scared girl who arrived at this gate 1 year ago, the girl who thought her life was completely over. In some ways, she was still here inside me, but she was not scared anymore. And she was not alone. I started walking down the path toward him. The earth of my garden was warm and soft under my feet. I called out his name. He turned around. The afternoon sun was bright, and it flashed on the gold ring on his finger. It was the same ring he put on my hand on that sad wedding day. But now, it did not feel like a chain. It did not bite my skin. It looked different. It looked like a circle of sunlight. It looked like a promise. He smiled at me, that real big smile that I loved, and I smiled back at him. We were two people who had found each other in a lonely place. We had learned that the strongest, loudest kind of love often grows in the quietest soil. My parents told me Daniel was a good man, but they didn't tell me what a good man really is. A good man is not someone who comes and rescues you from your life. He is not a prince who saves you. A good man is someone who sees you are trapped, and he quietly hands you the keys to the lock. He is someone who trusts you to open the door yourself. He is someone who says, "Drive. You choose the way." They never told me that cages can become gardens. They never said that a place that feels like a prison can become a home, but it can happen if you are stubborn enough. It can happen if you are brave enough to plant seeds in the dark, even when you are not sure they will grow. You have to believe in the possibility of life, even when everything around you feels dead. And they never told me that my life did not end on the day they signed that paper. It did not stop. It just started over. It started growing in new ways, in strange directions that I could not see at the time. It was like a river that was forced to change its path. It was a scary change, but it led me to an ocean I never knew existed. So, if you are in a place you did not choose, remember this. If you are sitting in a room, staring at a closed door, and you feel like your life is over, do one small thing. Plant something. It can be a real seed in the dirt, or it can be a seed of hope in your heart. Just find the tiniest seed you can and give it water. Give it a little bit of your time and your care. And one day you might look up from your work and realize you are not in a cage anymore. You will find that you are standing in a beautiful garden, enjoying the shade from all the things you thought you had lost forever.